By Shi Sing, the third city of Dibing, the outer city. A small shop. Some old signboards are hung on the door frame. Although they have faded a little, they have been wiped clean. It reads commonly used spell trading office in large characters, and there is a red seal printed on the lower right corner of the signboard, with light flowing on it, by Shi Sing Fu seal. Sunlight poured into the store through the glass. The owner of the store, Zhou Ji, sat behind the collection table with a pen in hand, writing and drawing on a notebook. A small bed was placed beside him, and a petite figure was lying on the bed, taking a nap. So, in this way, can the second air release of the soaring technique be guaranteed? He murmured, carefully pondering every word on the notebook in front of him. Boss, I heard from my coworker that you have an improved movement technique here. A middle-aged man pushed open the door and walked in. Years of working in the open air made his complexion dark and his skin rough. A piece of spiritual crystal, the book is here, first record the breath, the training room is at the back, take the book in. Zhou Ji took out a booklet from under the counter without raising his head. After a lot of hands. It is limited to 1 hour. After 1 hour, 5 points will be charged for every half hour. If it is less than half an hour, it will be counted as half an hour, and if it exceeds 1 hour, it will be counted as 1 hour. 5 points is 0.5 spirit crystals. As he spoke, Zhou Ji had already pushed a small machine on the other side. The machine is flat with a palm-sized protrusion on it. The middle-aged man very skillfully pressed his palm up and entered his spiritual energy. A screen appeared above the machine, showing the detailed information of the middle-aged man and his lifelike avatar. Zhou Ji shook the booklet at hand on the machine, the display screen refreshed, and an extra line was added to the experience part of the man's detailed information. 15 hours 23 minutes and 23 seconds, August 8, 582, 182 seconds. Buy and learn the spell Strong Movement of Objects from the Common Spell Exchange at number 22, Huangdingba Street, City number 3, Dibing. Then, I saw the balance column in the man's information that was placed in a prominent place in the front. The number of 22.3 jumped to 21.3. Come on, it's time to start now. Zhou Ji reminded him again, seeing that the man hadn't moved. Oh, okay, boss, is your spell really useful? Moving more things at the same cost. The man hesitated for a while, but still spoke. Nonsense. This is a serious shop, I sell serious spells, and the city magic supervisor has checked it. Zhou Ji glared at the man and slapped the booklet on the table. Love to learn or not to learn? Seeing that Zhou Ji was angry, the man didn't dare to say any more, and hurriedly walked back with the pamphlet. Due to the control of spell circulation, all spells sold by spell shops can only be provided to guests for on-site learning and cultivation, and cannot be brought out. Moreover, only commonly used spells can be circulated on the market, such as Kung Fu and Kung Fu techniques, which belong to the control category. Daddy, you're swearing again. Zhou Ji just came back to his senses and was about to continue changing the spells in his hands, when he heard a soft and waxy voice that had just woken up from the side. He changed his face and showed a smile, and said to the little girl who had just got up from the cot behind the spiritual receiving platform, and the hair was still fluffy, "Why, Xiaoyui, didn't I say that I am not a swear word? For example, I am as your father, right? You are the eldest father, not the old man." The little girl looks like only 3 or 4 years old, which is the age to be loved. Just by paying attention, you can see that her eyes are grey, and there is no expression at all. Haha, that's a catchphrase. Zhou Ji smiled and uncovered the stubble and then said, "Has Xiaoyui woke up? Do you want to drink some water?" Zhou Ji made a random move, and on the small dining table behind the collection table that was blocked by the curtain, a glass with a colorful sky painted over it flew over and landed precisely in his hands. This is the first level fighting art, which is a common spell in life, and can only control the flight and movement of some small objects. Of course, there is also an attack-killing Yawuju that corresponds to it, which is a control-type Ju. After getting the water cup, Joji's finger swiped again, and a cloud of clear water the size of the mouth of the cup appeared in the air, and it fell into the cup with a squeak, just about Onet heard of the mouth of the cup. This is water technique. In this world where cultivation is popular, spells are highly standardized. There are special ones for cultivation, which are divided into 4 levels from low to high. The general naming is also a certain merit, a certain record and the like. For example, the common practice method Nawangong used by the residents of Bai Shi Er Sing belongs to the lowest level practice method. There are also tactic and jutsu as I mentioned earlier. Tactic is an offensive tactic, tactic is a commonly used spell, and its tiers are also included in the name: basic, advanced, advanced, top. Generally, if there is no equal order in the name, it will be the first order by default. In addition to this, there is also a kind of exercise called secret method, which is actually divided into secret method, secret scroll, and secret treasure, corresponding to low, medium, high, and third level exercises. They are all used to break through. From chi refining breakthrough to foundation building, the foundation building secret scroll is needed. These secret methods are also things that restrict circulation. If there are people in the chi refining realm who want to break through to the foundation, they need to pay a high fee, and then they can practice after layers of review. The high cost alone excludes most ordinary people. Joji is also one of the most people. Xia Rui is well behaved and sensible. She just woke up and didn't cry. She took the water cup from Joji's hand, sat on the cot and drank it in one breath. Then she wiped her mouth, groped to get out of bed and put on her shoes, and turned around to put her bed on the bed. Flat and folded. On the side, Joji silently watched his daughter do these things, and after she turned around and groped away, she reached out and smoothed out some neglected places on the bed. "Daddy, didn't I make it tidy again?" Although there is a problem with her eyes, Xia Rui's other senses are very sensitive. Hearing this, Joji smiled lightly. "You are still young, you will be fine when you get to know them slowly. Big Daddy, you should tell me next time that it's not tidy, and then I'll fix it again." "That's right. I'll be self-reliant too." Hearing this, Joji couldn't help but laugh. Do children in this world have such developed language functions? 3 or 4-year-old girl, the logic is really clear. This world, yes, for Joji, he felt that he was a soul from another world called Earth. In the last life, he worked overtime late one day and fainted in front of the computer. When he opened his eyes again, he had become a little baby in front of the orphanage. This world is very different from the world where Joji lives. The core thing is self-cultivation, and the basic energy is spiritual energy, not technology and electricity. There are also great similarities. Just like the language used, in Joji's childhood studies, he discovered that the universal language in this world is actually an ideogram, and the language logic is very similar to the one he used in his previous life. Of course, there is life. Look at the fan blades rotating in the air, and then look at the glass that shines through the noon sun. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com and the concrete building outside, and the TV placed on the small table opposite the sanctuary. Oh no, it should be called the spirit screen. These are called spiritual products in this world, and the full name is spiritual use of technology to invent products. "Daddy, you're in a daze again." Before Joji's emotion was over, a small hand waving around in front of him pulled him back. He smiled. "I'm just thinking. After all, improving spells requires more thinking. It's obvious that I'm in a daze." Xiaoyui pouted and muttered, and suddenly, she said as if thinking of something, "Daddy, is it almost 3:30 now? Little fairy, hurry up, hurry up." Joji turned to look at the time on the clock. It was 15:25. "Yes, it's almost 3:30, I'll open the spiritual curtain for you. Joji raised his hand again, and a spiritual essence flew out, ditching the box-like spiritual curtain, and with the rushing A screen lit up, and a voice came from it. This station's news: the Southern Federation will open a new batch of clan colleges today, providing free training to qualified people after primary education. The latest news says that the Southern Federal Star Region Planning Department is currently being besieged by demonstrators. They believe that the Southern Federal only uses the depletion of spiritual energy and lack of resources as an excuse to destructively mine the newly discovered planets, and to destructively mine their surface wisdom civilizations. The destruction is inhumane, a slaughter. From this newspaper, the Southern Federation Interstellar Development Team has arrived in the unexplored star field. Currently, the nearest galaxy that can be observed is still 100 light-years away, and it is expected to take 132 years to arrive. Joji looked at the familiar scene on the spiritual screen, his eyelids jumped wildly. That, is it the Milky Way? Joji felt dazzled. He never thought that one day he would be able to see the Milky Way again. Big Daddy? What's wrong? Why are you in a daze again? Xia Rui's voice came again. She was moving the small bench and sitting in front of the spiritual screen, waiting for Joji to adjust the station. Wait a minute, darling Xiaorui, I'll tune in right away. After saying that, Joji had already tuned the channel to another segment, and the opening song of Little Fairies Wu La La had just ended. Hearing that the channel had been adjusted, Xiaorui stopped talking immediately and silently listened. Here, Joji also came back to his senses. Looking at the spell he had just written in his hand, he closed and held it, adjusted the back of the chair to a comfortable angle, and slowly closed his eyes. A few breaths after darkness descended, a display interface appeared in front of his eyes. There are 2 rows of values in the upper left corner, namely Wu Xin, 2398 and Dao Miao 8. Just like the display of the Computer Resource Manager, there are many book-shaped icons on the left, and the icons are followed by names. From top to bottom, they are all exercises that Joji memorized. One of the books is open, and its name is also a bit bigger, and the name is Void. The basic effect and training method displayed in the upper half of the display box in the middle: soaring, determining, gather spirit essence on both feet, jump higher. In the lower part, there are 2 lines of light green characters, which Joji calls an additional effect: jump height increased by 30%, spirit energy consumption reduced by 5% after more than 10 breaths. The name of the spell in the upper half of the display box changed to second stage Tengchu, and in the lower half of the display box, there is a 3rd line of white words: you can jump again in the air. This time the altitude is reduced by 80%. There is also an illusory white plus sign below this line of white words. At the same time, in the vertical frame on the left, there is an icon of a book. The name happens to be Second Stage Soaring Technique, just below the original soaring technique. There was a pleasant sound of ding-dong, and Joji only saw that the Dao Miao in the upper left corner increased by 5 to 13. Finally, I've got enough good points. Joji's heart moved slightly, and the exercise method on the display had been changed to another one. Wind control: control the wind, gather the wind into needles to attack the enemy, increase the sharpness by 100%. A little practice method: green, sharpness increased by an additional 100%, green, flying speed is increased by an additional 100%. Under the additional effect of the 2 greens, the solid white plus sign flickered. Joji focused his attention on the plus sign, and the 3rd small menu in the right column opened, showing a row of entries that expressed effects. In the end, I found an effect in it, and my mind fell on it. Soon, a white entry was added to the additional effect of this wind control art: consumption reduced by 1%. Joji's thoughts moved again, and another effect was added to this white entry: slightly increases toughness. At the same time, the magic point in the upper left corner was instantly reduced by 10, and only a very bachelor 3 was left there. The expression of the entire spell on the panel has changed, and the basic effects have been greatly improved. control the wind, condense the wind blades to attack the enemy, increase the sharpness by 200%, and increase the flight speed by 200%. Zhou thoughts kept going, and he continued to refine and strengthen it, and finally changed the style of this wind control art, and even changed the name 100 Blades Wind Control Art. Control the wind, condense the wind blades to attack the enemy, increase the sharpness of the wind blades by 200%, and increase the flying speed of the wind blades by 200%, blue, sharpness increased by an additional 200%, blue, flight speed increased by an additional 200%, blue, consumption reduced by 30%, toughness increased. At this time, Zhou's eyes fell on the upper half of the display box. When it came to the content of the cultivation method, some of the expressions in it changed, and some expressions were added. Keeping the updated formula firmly in his mind, he slowly opened his eyes and exited the state just now. This thing Zhou called it a cultivation method editor, and the two main data, one is called enlightenment point, and the other is called Taoism point. There are unified specifications for the exercises in this world, but due to the different people who create the exercises, the hidden basic effects and additional effects are different. Others can only feel it slightly through cultivation, but I can see it through the exercise editor. In the exercise editor, Zhou can purify entries with additional effects by consuming heart comprehension points. Each purification will improve. The progress of the improvement is determined according to the consumption of heart comprehension points. At most, a multiple of 10 is consumed at a time. For each additional purification of the same entry, the maximum consumption will increase by 10. If you use the maximum consumption of purification, the effect of improvement is also obvious. The first purification will increase to the highest effect of the current color entry, and the second purification will increase the effect of a higher quality color. For now, the highest quality color that Zhou Jininj can cultivate is green for the low-level exercises, and blue for the middle level. The qualities corresponding to the colors are white, green, and blue, in ascending order. As for going up, you need to wait for the cultivation technique to be upgraded again before you can confirm it. Every time you add 2 entries to a Kung Fu technique, you will be promoted to 1 level. In terms of cultivation techniques, the additional effect of low-level Kung Fu is at most 2 entries. Occasionally, there will be only 1 entry or even no entry. The rule of order is a maximum of 4 entries. Further on the records and classics, Zhou deduced that there should be 6 and 8 entries respectively. As for the method of adding or changing entries, it is naturally a good point. The addition or modification of the first and second entries requires 1 or 2 points. The addition or modification of the third and fourth entries requires 10 or 20 clever points. According to the rules summarized by Zhou in the past time, for every 2 entries of 1 level, the addition or modification needs to increase 10 times of the previous level. At present, there is still a rule: the basic effect of the cultivation method will be greatly improved after the level is upgraded. And the first entry after the upgrade can have 2 effects, just like the third entry in Zhou's 100 Blades Wind Control Art. As for the acquisition of enlightenment points and Taoism points, it is also related to the exercises. Every time Zhou memorizes a manuscript for cultivation such as exercises, magic formulas, or spells, the UU reading www.uuganshu.com will naturally rise. Law quality fluctuates. The highest known so far is a rise of 28 points. And every time he creates a Kung Fu technique and is accepted by the editor, the magic point will increase, and the magnitude is temporarily uncertain. At present, Zhou only knows that the highest one is an increase of 6, which is the one he created. When vigorously moving objects. This kind of creation in Zhou's previous life can only be called improvement, but the rules of this world are like this: new exercises are new exercises, even if you just reduce the consumption of spiritual energy by the old exercises. This is a very powerful system, at least in Zhou's view. In this world where the control of self-cultivation is extremely strict, who would have thought that someone could use a small breeze technique to post an entry and post a wind control art, and through a Naiwan gong, post an entry and paste it into a Naiwan method? It is a pity that the exercises modified by the exercise modifier cannot be written and sold. When Zhou couldn't understand the specific principles of changing or refining the entry, he could only use it passively, instead of writing it out actively. If he was forced to write it, he would only have the feeling that the words were suddenly forgotten by the tip of the pen. Of course, Zhou can still do some self-learning by changing the content of his practice after using the exercise modifier. This is also the basis on which he has always created the exercises. Just follow the gourd and draw the scoop. Although most of them have failed, there are also many successful cases with more and more experience. Zhou felt that he was very lucky. He came to this world and found that he had such an auxiliary plugin. He even felt that he had to remember the required course of 2 years and 3 years of living in the university. As long as you give yourself enough time and enough exercises, the top-level exercises are not a dream. Zhou's shop is not very spacious. Except for the shelves on the outside where spell booklets are placed, all the rooms inside are single rooms for practicing spells. There are 8 rooms in total. In addition, Zhou also used a curtain to separate out an area behind the collection platform as a living area. Originally, the eldest man didn't need such a complicated life by himself, but who made him carry such a small burden on his own? Zhou Xiaoyue appeared 3 years ago, when Zhou just opened the store. At that time, Zhou sent out several improved common spells before and after running to get this approval. And on the way back to the store that night after the approval, the baby girl's cry caught his attention. In the end, Zhou, who was still soft-hearted, listened to the baby girl's cry when she had eaten the last meal, and finally gritted her teeth and took her home. Before and after the filing, buying all kinds of baby products, made him even worse. Fortunately, all the difficulties have passed. Zhou Xiaoyue's appearance makes Zhou feel that he is truly living in this world and has a tie with this world. It also made him feel that everything around him was not a dream, not a game, nor his own fantasy after being unconscious. "Daddy, I'm hungry." Xiaorui, who had just listened to the spirit screen quietly, suddenly spoke up, causing Zhou to retreat from the state of 100 blades of wind control after pondering and improving it. He turned his head to look, and just happened to see that the episode of the TV series over there was over, and there was an advertisement in the middle. "Okay, Daddy will wash an apple for Xiaoyue to eat," Zhou said, beckoning again. An apple flew out of the bag in the corner behind the curtain, made full contact with a cloud of water in the air, spun and scrubbed with the help of the wind, and finally blown dry. After a series of processes, apple just flew to Zhou Xiaoyue. "Thank you, Daddy." Zhou Xiaoyue took the apple with a smile and nibbled it with both hands. She could hear the apple clearly when it flew over just now, so even if she couldn't see it at this time, she could reach out and get it. Zhou held his face with one hand and looked at the little girl over there who was obediently nibbling on the apple. He sighed in his heart that he didn't know which black-hearted parent abandoned such a well-behaved girl in the first place. If someone came to recognize her in the future, he would be beaten to death. Disagree. Taking advantage of the girl's efforts to nibble on the apple, Zhou switched the channel back again. Ling Yuan escorted the mind to contact the spiritual screen. The news being broadcast on it was played backwards, and finally it was fixed on the screen that had just passed by. It's the Milky Way. Zhou activated the magnification technique and looked at the screenshot carefully. Due to the special nature of the spiritual screen, although the picture was transmitted, it was still as clear as the vector illustration. Under the blessing of magnification, a special magic for the precision industry, he clearly saw the Orion cantilever, the star on the cantilever, and the water blue planet in the third orbit around the star. 100 years? Zhou turned the channel back to the program Xiaorui was watching, and his brows gradually wrinkled. If it is divided according to the star field, the closer the central part of the star field is, the richer the aura, and the farther away, the thinner the aura. The planet that was violently dug up by those development teams in one day was farther south of the White Picker planet, but it was also closer than Earth. If there is no spiritual energy on that planet, then the Earth is even less likely to have spiritual energy. Looking at it this way, the Earth may face the same fate as this planet in 100 years from now. Boss, it's done, the time hasn't passed, right? The middle-aged man hurried out of the training room, raised his eyes to watch the time, and pressed his hand to the interactive device, the one used to pay the spirit crystal plus the timer. Instrument. If you have the time to gossip, your time will be up to an hour. Joji laughed at the man's panicked movements. Fortunately, the man's movements were quick enough, and the time finally stood at 58 minutes. Thank you very much. I just finished practicing. This spell is really useful, and the consumption of spiritual energy is much smaller. Thank you for your compliment, and welcome to come next time. With 0.8 spirit crystals in his account, Joji had a professional smile on his face, but he didn't see the indifference just now. This is the way the shop charges. After a spell is successfully filed, it will be opened with the Magic Supervision Office, also known as the Superintendent of Magic for short, which means paying taxes and paying management fees. It doesn't make much money at a time, but it has a lot of traffic. Today is not a rest day, so only a few people come over for half a day. When it is a rest day, the training room has to line up. The sun had already slanted down. Joji took out a jade token from his pocket, grabbed the jade token, and wrote the newly improved second Duan Tengju technique into it with consciousness. Press the interactor with the palm of your hand, and after seeing your own information pop up on it, put the jade card on it again. There is one more item in the experience column. At 16 hours 21 minutes and 21 seconds on August 8, 582, 182, the owner of the commonly used spell trading office at number 22, Huangdingba Street, No. Technology to start the review, and the review will be completed and notified in 1 working day. The Jade card is equivalent to a mobile phone on Earth, which can be controlled by consciousness and call some people with known identity codes. On the same planet, 2 people can communicate with consciousness through the Jade card. It can also be used as a U-disc, and the content stored in it can be interacted with a device such as an interactive machine. After dealing with the matter at hand, Joji continued to lie on the chair and closed his eyes to practice. What is meditation? The 5 hearts are upside down, that is the practice of ancient antiques. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. In modern society, after the practice has been improved again and again, you can practice walking, lying down, and even sleeping. Can be repaired. With the sound of shallow breathing, the surrounding wind gathered around Joji, and a small knife with an almost invisible handle gradually condensed, and then slowly spread out. This is because he is familiar with the updated wind control art. The transformation of the condensed form from needle to blade has changed a lot in the way the spirit energy runs, and the consumption has also increased. Fortunately, the latest entry has the effect of reducing consumption, and the total consumption is not large. He now has 2 tactics of attacking and killing nature, 1 thunder art and 1 wind art. Lei Ju is powerful, consumes a lot, and moves a lot, so it is completely unsuitable for cultivation in the city. After all, theoretically speaking, Joji's tactic is illegal. Cultivating this thing is like holding a controlled firearm and practicing guns in your own backyard. It's almost like calling the police to tell the police that they have gun control here. The wind art is much more convenient. As long as you don't attack it, people around you will subconsciously think that it is a breeze or a more powerful blowing art, even if you feel the fluctuation of the spiritual energy in the wind. Joji wanted to familiarize himself with this magic formula as soon as possible to prepare for tonight's action. He has been stuck at the peak of chi refining for 2 years, and he has been saving money for the past 2 years, but the official foundation building fee is 1 price per day, just like the housing price in the city in the previous life. It will always rise, and it will never be enough. Being poor, he wanted to change, and he found some channels for private transactions. It's hard to tell whether this kind of private transaction is true or false, but as long as one point is true, Joji believes that he can post it through his own exercise editor. Of course, after all, this is a violation, and Joji hesitated for a long time. But just today, after seeing the news, he finally made a decision. Night falls. The city has not fallen asleep. A lantern by the roadside illuminates the surroundings as bright as day. Spirit lamp. It is a kind of formation arranged with some metal materials. It is covered with a layer of iron. It looks like a small vertical cannon barrel, fixed on the ground. After the energy is supplied through the spirit gathering array, a ball of light emitting a soft glow will be shot from the cannon barrel at the set time, and stick to the baffle extending from the outer wall of the cannon barrel to about 8 meters in the air. Lasted exactly 12 hours. There were not many pedestrians on the road, and most of them were using the swift step technique to hurry on the road. Occasionally, on the middle street, a shuttle-shaped vehicle of 2 or 3 meters long could be seen floating through the air, and the speed was extremely fast. This is the floating shuttle, which can be called by raising your jade card, and the fee is calculated in minutes. Those who have assets at home can also buy one by themselves. The operation is very simple, no driver is required, just enter the destination you want to go through the jade card, and then upload it through the interactive device. Some people with some assets in the outer city will buy such a transportation vehicle, and they can set it to release it when they go to work, and let the floating shuttle pick up the business by itself. People who live in outer cities don't have enough assets to fully support a floating shuttle. The circle closest to the inner city is full of high-end communities, and each household is a small courtyard. Hello, I'm going to Building 33, District D. This is my proof. A hoarse voice reached the ears of the security guard who was watching the spiritual screen. The security guard turned his head and found that it was a middle-aged man with sallow skin. He was holding a paper card in his hand, and the security guard glanced at it, confirmed it, and then opened the door. If you look closely, you can see the marks on the man's face, most of which are drawn with various things. This is of course Joji's method. Under normal circumstances, the head of a high-end community can enter directly through the interactive machine next to the access control, and the guests invited by the head of the house will get this card, and the person holding the card can also enter the community. Of course, there is a more convenient measure to directly enter the information through the jade card, but in order to protect the privacy of the head of the household, the community has also set up this method of disposable paper cards. After Joji passed the entrance guard, he brought the mask in his hand to his face, and shadow swiftness was activated. It seemed that it merged into the shadow and turned into a shadow, and swept along the road sign to a single courtyard. Shadow running speed increased by 100%, green, running speed increased by 100%, green, blends into shadows, increasing concealment by 100%. This spell was obtained by Joji by changing the entry of Quick Step, and the effect is much better than the Quick Step on the market. In Ding 33 courtyards. At this time, some people have gathered, and some of them use signs to write the things they exchanged, the things they need, and hold them in front of them. Another part is to walk around in the courtyard. No one spoke, everything was quiet. When someone wants to trade with the person who raised the card, they will raise their right hand, and at the entrance of the small building, a service staff will introduce the two into the room of the small building to talk. The shadow swayed, and Joji appeared at the gate of the courtyard with a mask on. All around, there are eyes on the hidden places. Tickets. The guard in black standing at the door raised his hand to block his way. Joji's movements didn't stop at all, he raised his hand and threw a half-palm-sized, irregularly shaped spirit crystal to the guard in black. This is a whole piece of spirit crystal, which is a restricted exchange material. Each person in the Qi refining realm can exchange one from the spirit crystal bank every day for daily practice. It is said that the higher the level of registration, the higher the amount. The guard in black caught the spirit crystal, felt the purity inside, and threw it into the basket beside him with satisfaction. The sound of stones colliding came from the basket, and it was heard that there were already a lot of tickets inside. I don't know if I can find an opportunity to rob this guy. This thought swirled around in Joji's mind, and was immediately thrown out by him. In a society ruled by law, you still have to live. Being able to live in a high-end community without any trouble in opening such a private transaction venue can already represent the strength of the organizer. When Joji entered the door, he immediately attracted several obscure probes. It feels like being watched. He can also use the exploration technique, which was modified with a spell for exploring metal spiritual mines. It is said that in the ancient world of self-cultivation, everyone still followed a basic etiquette, and they used exploration techniques if they didn't meet each other. Nowadays, people are a lot more reckless. Thinking about it too, in ancient times you could do things if you disagree, but now everyone just follows the rules, and it is not allowed to arbitrarily investigate other people's unspoken rules. Fortunately, everyone is very interested, but they took it back after they had roughly sensed Joji's strength. Joji maintained the operation of the breath restraining technique, suppressed his realm to the 7th or 8th level of chi refining, and pretended to wander around the venue like a frequent veteran. Breathe, condition the breath and prevent exploration. Green, probability to block detection within 2 realms. Green, simulates the realm of breath. The closer it is to the real realm, the lower the probability of being discovered. Originally, it was a small yard. There were about 20 people coming and going, and there were not many things exchanged. Most of them were divided into 3 types: exercises, spiritual crystals, and medicinal herbs. Joji soon found his goal. It was a tall and thin man holding a sign, "Secret Scroll of Foundation Establishment, accept the exchange of magic tricks, spirit crystals, medicinal powder pills and other rare treasures." Tisk tisk, there are other rare treasures. I really thought there would be some rare treasures here. Suppressing Wei Wei's excitement, Joji walked around the venue again, until he saw someone raising his hand and being led into the room by the service staff. He finally stood in front of this tall and thin man, and raised himself in a similar fashion. Right hand. Soon, the service staff with a small badge on his chest walked up to the 2 of them and led them into the house. As soon as you enter the door, you can see a sign hanging on the wall. This exchange provides authentication services, and charges 10 spirit crystals each time. There is such a charge, which Joji did not expect. The small building is a THRESTRE single-family building. All the walls on the first floor were removed, and many small compartments were separated by wooden boards. It looked like the training room in Joji's small shop. However, the training room provided by Joji is not as high-end as here, and the magic circle is also depicted on the wooden board. It seems that it should be a simple soundproof magic circle. 100 spirit crystals, or 1 middle-level magic formula or 3 low-level magic formulas. If you have anything else, come up with it for negotiation. Sure enough, Joji was slightly relieved. Pretty much what I thought. The main threshold for things like secret methods is that they are expensive, so the price in private transactions is directly reduced by dozens of times. Think about it, for a person, this thing is a one-time thing, and after the foundation is built, it is thrown away, and if it is used for private transactions, it will be thrown into the flea market for blood. I have heard before that there are even many cultivators in the foundation establishment realm who have established foundations through formal channels and then come out and sell the secret spells for second-hand use. These situations have only now subsided. A year ago, an old pedant from the research department of cultivation techniques developed a method of forming a foundation with a formation method, which led to fewer cases of selling official secret techniques to return blood. The pressure is much less. 10 spirit crystals plus a low-level magic formula. Joji thought about it for a while and then offered a price. This is the market now. You have to know that after the promotion of the foundation building method, there are not many secret foundation building methods on the market, and the price will naturally be higher. Joji naturally doesn't believe it. Secret techniques are not consumables. Although they have an impact now, they are definitely not that big. The two struggled again, and finally set the price at 30 spirit crystals and another low-level magic formula. 30 spirit crystals plus a low-level magic formula, brother, this is the lowest price I can give. The price is fine, but I have to apply for an appraisal. Of course, I will pay for the cost myself. Saying that, Joji raised his hand to ring the bell. This time, the tall and thin man in front of him was breathing in a mess. Brother, we won't bother you anymore. How about 20 spirit crystals plus a low-level magic formula for a single price? Yo? Joji stopped and looked at the man. What do you say? Brother, are you trying to trick me? After speaking, he got up and prepared to leave. The man waved his hand quickly. Brother, this secret technique is what I used before. There is a certain chance of failure, but if you try it a few more times, won't you succeed? Joji thought about it, and looked at the man with the exploration technique. Sure enough, the information that was fed back was the Foundation establishment realm, but it seemed that the realm was only in the early stage, maybe it was only 1 or 2 layers. 10 spirit crystals, plus a low-level magic formula, 1 price. After all, there is a problem with this secret magic, and it may not be good or bad. I also have to bear the risk. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Joji was still standing, intending to leave if he disagreed. Okay. The tall and thin man gritted his teeth and finally made a decision. Then it's settled. Joji took off the messenger bag, took out 10 spirit crystals and a booklet, and put them on the table. Wait, how do you judge the authenticity of your magic formula? The tall and thin man hesitated and spoke. Joji indifferently lit the calling bell on the side. It's optional, but I won't pay for the appraisal fee. Looking at Joji's appearance, the man hesitated for a moment and finally took out a booklet from his arms and handed it over. Joji took the booklet, pushed the things in front of him to the opposite side, and then lay down on the back of the chair and closed his eyes slightly, as if he was taking a nap. Of course, his attention was still on the man in front of him. Although it was said that it was impossible for ordinary people to commit murder here, he still kept his mind. After 10 breaths, Joji saw the display that appeared in the dark, and immediately retreated after only looking at the word Foundation. When this place is not for detailed inspection, all he does is to confirm that this thing is really enough for the secret method of foundation building. As for the effect, it is not a problem for him. Then, the transaction is complete. When Joji opened his eyes, the tall and thin man also glanced at the magic formula and spoke after confirming that there was no major problem. Of course, there is no problem. Joji can now create the first-level magic formula. If he is serious, he can even create the most powerful magic formula in the low level. Of course, what is given to the man in front of you is not the best. In a low-level Yanhuoju, the 2 additional entries posted are still entries with reduced power. He believed that nothing could be seen in this man's eyes. It was already early morning, and the dark clouds blocked the moonlight. A dark figure is moving forward fast on the street. If you don't pay attention, others may even think it is the wind. After completing the transaction, Joji lingered in the so-called exchange for a while, and then set off to rush home. I've come a long way. I shouldn't be caught up in the black market like the dog blood plot in the novel, right? He pondered to himself, thinking about whether he would reveal anything. Yes, there shouldn't be any. One is not showing money, and the other is not feuding. But just when he thought so, his face suddenly changed slightly. What a crow's mouth! In the field of vision of the exploration technique, behind the corner dozens of meters in front, a group of light representing the early stage of foundation building was gently beating. It's so late, who's around the corner? You don't always go out for a walk, do you? Joji's face became serious, and the wind around him gradually gathered. Building a foundation is amazing, isn't it? Although he had already discovered the situation, he kept jumping forward and running. It seems that there is no abnormality at all, and even jumped a step forward when passing through this intersection. In the realm of chi refining and foundation building, there is no such thing as flying. But jumping high and jumping far is still within the limited jump range. People in the air have no way to control their own body trajectory. The person who intercepted Joji was obviously a veteran in this line of work. Just as Joji jumped into the air and fell, a metal projectile flew towards him with a cracking sound. The Imperial Artifact. Joji, who had discovered all of this long ago, would have succeeded in a surprise attack, only to see that when he was in the air, he lightly stepped on the air, and his whole body jumped up a lot. Second stage soaring technique. When Joji creates spells by himself, he will use the spells he has posted as templates, which will be simpler. Compared with the second Duanteng Juju he created today, the second Duanjutsu he mastered is more powerful with the addition of the 3 blue entries. The projectile shot by the Imperial weapon art didn't even hit Joji's shadow, but Joji in the air was already throwing his hand in the direction where the projectile flew. The 3 wind blades that had been accumulating since just now shot out, and with the blessing of 5 times the speed, they came to the attacker in a breath. The attacker only saw Joji in the air dodging the projectile he shot. He swung backhand, and the next moment, he felt that the chest, abdomen, and neck were cold at the same time, as if there was wind blowing. His last thought was, "What the hell?" Saying that this guy is only a Kyrfining level 7 or 8. Joji landed. In the corner alley, the head of the corpse had just fallen. The 3 wind blades are the best level that Joji can control at the same time. One broke through the dantian, the other broke through the heart, and the other directly decapitated. Although he is only a Kyrfining realm, his Kyrfining realm is the top-level cultivation technique in the usage level, and the attack and killing techniques are also among the best in the middle level. After the 2 are combined, the attack can completely reach the damage standard of Dao Foundation establishment. What's the situation? There should be no marks on his body. Joji felt that he was very cautious. He was a quick recaller and quickly realized that the only flaw was the secret method of foundation building. This thing is sold by a tall and thin man, they may have the means to locate this secret method. Joji was alert and looked up on the street in the direction he came from. Sure enough, there are 2 guys following him behind him. The lantern was bright, it was already early morning, and there was no one on the street. After a while, 2 figures rushed over one after the other. The guy's position has stopped, it should be the boss who is entangled, let's hurry over. The tall and thin man spoke, and the speed increased a bit. Tisk tisk, why is it impossible that this guy was directly killed by the boss? Having said that, this guy is also cautious, and actually led us around such a big circle. If the boss found the problem, he went around from the other side and pointed to maybe this guy ran away. The person who spoke followed behind the man, who was a fat man. The fat on his body swayed as he ran. The 3 of them have only recently come to the 3rd city of Dising, and they are doing crimes on this planet. Every time they go to a city, they find a place like a private exchange and sell the secret scroll of foundation establishment. The 3 also knew that people who usually buy these things are in the late stage of chi refining, and they will accumulate some wealth on their bodies. And the late stage of chi refining is also convenient for them to deal with. Of course, if they see a more suitable fat sheep in the private exchange, the 3 brothers will also take action. After starting in one city, go to the next city, and make a case. This is the 3rd order for the 3 brothers. It's just that the situation has changed a bit this time. When the 2 turned the corner, they only saw a headless corpse sitting against the wall, and the secret foundation building method they sensed was placed on the corpse. Oops, be careful. The 2 who saw the corpse were only shocked for a moment, and they immediately reacted and wanted to avoid it. Just before the 2 could move, the tall and thin man's head flew up, and almost at the same time, his heart and dantian were also pierced. The other fat man seemed to be frightened, and stood there trembling all over. It wasn't trembling, it could be seen from the streaks on his body that this guy was bound by the air. Wind binding, this is Joji's name. In fact, this is not a spell or a tactic, it is just a usage of the 100 blades wind control tactic. First control the wind, and then condense the wind blade. What Joji did was to condense the wind into a sheet and roll up the fat man. This didn't last long. Almost at the moment the tall and thin man was killed, the fat man broke free. If he hadn't been restrained, he could still fight back, but now because of the delay of being restrained, when he broke free, 3 wind blades had already attacked. At the moment when he felt the wind blowing, so did Fatty's head fall. The voices of several people caused a noise from a house in the alley, which obviously alarmed others. He casually used sand raising technique and clear water technique to create a cloud of mud and poured it on the window of the house. Only then did Joji, wearing a mask, walk out of the shadow of the alley. He didn't care about the reaction to the first murder, he put on the gloves he had prepared before, took out a small bag from each of the 3 corpses' arms, and rummaged in their pockets for a while to make sure there was nothing left. Next, Joji used the Imperial Object technique to pile the bodies and heads of the 3 people into the corner trash can. Relying on my previous life watching criminal investigation dramas and some knowledge of the famous detective Nan, I carefully cleaned all the places that might have left traces on the street just now with water and washing techniques. Using magic to do these things is obviously much more convenient, and the scene is cleaned up in less than a minute. Before leaving, he didn't forget to set a fire with the burning fire art. This powerful flame can burn down the place in just 5 minutes. According to Joji's understanding, this is already a suburb, and the time for the city guards to arrive is 5 minutes. 2 minutes wasted back and forth, and those guys still have 3 minutes to arrive. Although the corpse will not be completely burnt during this period, this burning and the process of spraying water later can at least clear up some small clues that I didn't notice. After finishing everything, Joji's body melted into the shadows again, and quickly swept away in another direction. Foundation Establishment Secret Treasure. In the display box, Joji felt that his eyes were about to fall when he saw these 4 words. But when he continued to watch it, he was relieved. No wonder the 3 guys sold this thing as a secret method. Foundation building secrets. The success rate of foundation building is increased by 50%. After the foundation is successfully established, the speed of absorbing spiritual energy increases by 500%, and the capacity of dantian is increased by 100%. Blue, the success rate of foundation building is reduced by 30%. After successful foundation building, the speed of absorbing spiritual energy is reduced by 300%. White, after the foundation is successfully established, the recovery speed of the spirit essence increases by 10%, and the capacity of the dantian increases by 4%. White, after the foundation is successfully established, physical fitness increases by 10%, and spiritual essence purity increases by 10%. This is also the first time Joji has seen a secret treasure. There are only 3 entries in this foundation establishment secret treasure, but each has a double effect. Joji also has reason to speculate that the secret method can only have 1 entry per level. Of course, if you just look at the tiers, this treasure is definitely worth the money, but the first bonus effect is enough to put many people off. This entry that has almost reached the peak effect of blue quality is actually a negative attribute. I had no choice but to make myself cheap. Joji sighed and erased the first entry at will. Since it was the first entry, it only took 1 magic point which Joji also created. As for the revised entry, Joji just glanced at the first order entry provided on the right, and had a plan in mind. White, the success rate of foundation building increases by 1%, and the speed of absorbing spiritual energy increases by 10% after successful foundation building. The next step is to refine the entry. Joji has never stopped reciting the exercises since he came into contact with the exercises and opened the editor. At least he has memorized all the spells he can get in this city. In addition, the exercises he created over the years are also included in it, and there are still a lot of enlightenment points that he has always accumulated. Therefore, Joji never treated himself badly in the field of purification. After hundreds of points of enlightenment, all 3 entries were refined into orange. This is also the same as Joji's speculation. The quality of high-level exercise entries can be improved by another level, and it looks orange. Orange, the success rate of foundation building increases by 50%, and the speed of absorbing spiritual energy increases by 500% after successful foundation building. Orange, after the foundation is successfully established, the recovery speed of spirit essence increases by 500%, and the capacity of danshan increases by 100%. Orange, after the foundation is successfully established, the physical fitness increases by 500%, and the purity of the spiritual essence increases by 500%. At this moment, the effect of the foundation establishment secret treasure really showed. Joji carefully memorized the contents of the foundation establishment secret treasure, and then opened his eyes. The ignition technique was activated, and the booklet in his hand slowly turned into fly ash, and then when the wind blew, it blew outside along the window and floated into the air. At this time, the sky was already bright and clear, and there were already uncles and aunts cleaning the streets on the road. Most of them still use brooms to clean, and after the garbage is gathered together, a few people work together to load it into the garbage truck, and then use the dust removal technique to go through it again. There is no such thing as delaying aging in the Kyrphaning state. On the contrary, after a certain age, the state will decline with aging. Thinking of a way to build a foundation. In the foundation establishment secret treasure, it is required to find a place with abundant spiritual essence to cultivate the secret treasure. The more spiritual essence is abundant, the higher the basic success rate. But what kind of place is full of spiritual energy? In the place where he is, the spiritual energy is thin and tight. Joji, who has an intermediate level cultivation technique, will draw a vacuum around him every time he practices. In the few years of cultivation before entering the peak of chi refining, he always needed to move around. After draining this place, go to the next place, just like fighting a guerrilla war, to prevent being arrested by the city guards for disturbing the vitality of the city. Seeing that it was about to dawn outside, Joji slowly got up and opened the curtain behind him. On the single bed beside the dining table, the girl was sleeping soundly with her upside down. He didn't deliberately tiptoe, his daughter was unmoved for 10 hours a day, closed her eyes on time at 9 o'clock in the evening, and got up on time at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yawusha grabbed the small stove on the side, and did not add fuel. When the ignition technique was pinched, a flame ignited in the small stove, and the size and temperature could even be changed according to Joji's thoughts. The hot pot was filled with water, the oil was boiled dry, and after clearing the water, I was followed by the imperial object technique. A thin thread of oil flew out of the oil bucket and fell into the pot. After a while, 4 eggs lined up and jumped out from the corner, floating above the frying pan. With a few soft clicks, these eggs cracked on their own, and the egg white and yolk slowly fell in the air, occupying a corner in the pan, forming a perfect circle. I don't know where I saw a saying in my last life, that life is also cultivation. In this world, Joji is also working hard to practice. Although it is only a few simple applications of imperial artifacts, the subtle control of spiritual energy revealed in the middle is enough to make many people drop their jaws. Fried eggs, bread, 2 cups of milk with a little spiritual essence, and 2 apples, all placed on the table with imperial object technique. Joji then took out a roll of exercises and studied it carefully, closing his eyes from time to time. Open the editor, and compare and learn the exercises that have been enhanced by yourself with the enlightenment point recorded in the editor. Joji came here every day in the past, and today is no exception. What he did last night seemed to have nothing to do with him, and the sequelae of the first murder didn't show up on Zhou side at all. It was almost 7 o'clock, and Xia Rui, who was lying on the bed and was sleeping soundly, seemed to be sleeping a little uneasy at this time, and moved from side to side. Almost at the same time as the hour hand changed, Xia Rui on the bed suddenly opened her eyes and cried out with a wow. Zhou gently picked up his daughter as if he had expected it, and patted her on the back. Xia Rui is not afraid, Big Daddy is here. As a mature dad, in the past few years of practice, he has perfectly mastered the knack of holding and coaxing children. He patted his daughter's back lightly, shook his arms gently, and kept making a sound in his mouth, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid. Xiao Yui slowly loosened her hand that was holding his sleeve tightly, buried her face in his arms, and her body was still twitching from sobbing, making a vague and sobbing sound. Daddy, I have nightmares again. Did you still dream of little monsters pulling? Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Big Daddy punches one at a time, and all of them will be chased away. Hearing these words, Xiao Yui raised her head, her eyes filled with godlessness, crying like pear blossoms and rain. Big Daddy lied, eldest daddy is in the realm of qi refining now. What happened to the qi refining realm? Your eldest father can hit 3 foundation establishment realms with one hand. Daddy, you said that children who lie are going to be spanked. Children are children after all, and they were quickly distracted by Zhou's words, and the emotions just now disappeared. Hey! Your eldest daddy is really good now, let's show you another day. Zhou pinched her daughter's nose, and rubbed her clothes to remove the snot from her hands. But now, we're going to pee first, then wash our faces, brush our teeth, and have breakfast. Okay. Okay. Xia Rui nodded vigorously, struggled to get down from Zhou's arms, put on her own shoes, and after groping for a while, she walked all the way to the back of the training room in her little yellow duck-like pajamas. There is the only toilet in the whole shop. Zhou never changed the position of the furniture in the small shop, which also prevented the girl who was very familiar with it from being affected when she moved in the small shop. People who didn't pay attention would not realize that the little girl had a problem with her eyes. After the sound of flushing water, it was the sound of the faucet again. There are faucets in the shop, and the water in it is even the kind that can be drunk directly. In fact, all households in the outer city use this kind of tap water. After all, at least in the outer city where Zhou is located, every household is still closer to the way of life of ordinary people. There is no one as luxurious as Zhou, who uses spiritual energy to make water at will. In the past, Zhou used the water technique to wash her daughter's face and teeth every day, but when her daughter grew up, she had to wash her face and brush her teeth by herself, gradually becoming independent and more sensible. Usually on weekdays, the traffic on Zhou's side is very small. It was not until 3 shots in the sun that people came in the store. Zhou's eyes lit up when he saw this man. Haha, brother, how early? Are you here to deliver the spell book? How is it? There shouldn't be many problems with the city magic supervisor, right? The man named by Zhou as Brother Hao was surnamed Zhang. He was about 30 years old. He had a beard on his chin and looked quite Zhou. His family conditions are better than Zhou's. After 4 years of free education, he attended an intermediate vocational education class for 5 years and an advanced vocational training class for 3 years. In the end, they were successfully admitted to the city law supervisor. The two met when Zhou was running around for the store license for the first time. Look at what you said, Xiaoji, with your brother Hao here, as long as your spells are not dangerous and won't hurt anyone, there's basically no problem. Zhang Hao responded very familiarly, and threw a brand new booklet to Zhou. The outside of the booklet was sealed with an envelope, and a formation was reinforced on it. This was to prevent it from being opened in advance and peeked at it. Only the spell book specially produced by the sorcerer can be scanned on the interactive machine. The cover paper of this thing is special, and an induction array is printed in the interlayer. Then thank you Brother Hao for your hard work. Zhou took the booklet that recorded the second stage Tengjutsu, and shoved 2 more spirit crystals into Zhang Hao's hands. Zhang Hao didn't refuse, and he took it back in his arms. Haha, Ziaji, if you say this, you will be seen outside. Yo, our daughter is cultivating. The following words were addressed to Zhou Xiaoyui, who was sitting on the cot. At this moment, she was sitting cross-legged on the cot with her eyes closed, looking like she was meditating. But there was not the slightest spiritual energy fluctuation around her body. Hey, it's not like a child heard that after starting cultivation, he can expand his consciousness, and he can observe the surroundings through his consciousness, so he has to try it. Zhou had no other reaction to Zhang Hao's fuss, but just opened his mouth to explain. The idea of wanting to cultivate was proposed by Xiaoyui himself, and Zhou did not object to it. As long as he could understand the exercises and feel the spirit, he could cultivate even in the womb. Although the effect of the current exercises is somewhat worse than the ancient ones, the stability is surprisingly good. Almost every day, you can see people practicing cultivation outside the inner city walls, and there is no risk even if they are woken up. Ah, that's true. Zhang Hao reached out and wanted to touch Xiaorui's head, but considering that the little girl was cultivating in a decent manner, he didn't bother to bother. Forget it, it's not easy for you, the big man's family has to pull a girl. As he was talking, Zhang Hao suddenly said as if thinking of something, oh, by the way, Ziaji, are you not married? No. Zhou was a little dazed when asked about this. If he remembered correctly, Zhang Hao knew that he was not married. After all, he adopted Xiaoyui at that time and helped Xiaoyui to apply for various certificates. Could it be that you are so unprepared to get married? Guarding a small shop for the rest of your life? It won't work without a mother to take care of your daughter when she grows up. At this point, Zhou had already laughed wryly, but he understood why Zhang Hao suddenly brought this up. Is it my sister-in-law who wants to introduce someone to me, Brother Hao? Hey, you kid! Why, don't you look down on other people's daughters? Let me tell you, just like you who are single and have children, other daughters may not look down on you. This family is not bad, daughter, it's not bad, mainly because the meridians of both legs were broken due to an accident in the previous practice, and I couldn't walk for the rest of my life. Seeing that Zhou was impatient, Zhang Hao also stopped talking. Ziaji, I know you are still thinking about cultivating, but now you are raising children and running a shop, and you don't have much money at home, so you can cultivate. To what extent? Those resources and so on have been caught by the people in the inner city. Look at you, brother, and I, how long have I been refining the 8th level card, and there is not enough spiritual energy. Brother Hao, I'm going to move recently and go to Tianjia number 1 city. Zhou suddenly interrupted Zhang Hao's chatter. What? Tianjia no 1. Zhang Hao's eyes widened and he said every word. This planet is named Bai Shi Er Sing, which belongs to a planet under the Bai clan. Generally, like this kind of habitable planet, the distribution of spiritual elements above is a multipoint divergence pattern. And the manager builds the city according to the distribution of spiritual elements on the entire planet, starting with the center with the highest concentration of spiritual elements at each point as the inner city, and demarcates a certain area outwards to start the construction of the outer city. The overall concentration of spiritual elements at different spiritual element distribution points is also different. In Bai Shi Er, the concentration can be reflected intuitively in the naming. Tianjia number 1 city is the city with the richest spiritual essence in the entire planet, while Huangdingshi is the thinnest city. Okay. I said Ziaji. Zhang Hao said, his palm was already on Zhou's forehead, you won't burn your head out of cultivation, right? No, I'm serious. Then you're gone, what about our daughter? Take it. No, Ziaji, whose cultivator did you see with a daughter? Zhang Hao was a little numb. Don't look at the tip Zhou Ji gave him just now without hesitation, he actually took great care of Zhou Ji. He can guarantee that in addition to the things he received when he first met, after this guy adopted a daughter, he used every piece of spiritual crystal Zhou Ji gave him for Zhou Ji's own affairs. For example, maintaining relationships with some supervisors of the magic supervisor, treating guests to dinner, etc. Zhou Ji is also aware of this, because basically every time he eats and visits, he calls Zhou Ji with him, and he never leaves. You know, Xiao Yui can't live without me. Zhou Ji spoke slowly. Also, I also want to be stronger. This is what Zhou Ji replied to Zhang Hao. I want to become stronger. In fact, he also wanted to become stronger in the past, but at that time he was a bit more Buddhist and didn't have much sense of urgency. He firmly believed that as long as he relied on the exercise editor, he could even go out after 1,000 years. But after seeing the news of the discovery of the Milky Way a few days ago, Zhou Ji felt pressure in his heart. That place is his hometown, and he can't watch his hometown be destroyed. Xiao Po Bal's return plan has been revised many times by him. In the end, he also found that no matter which version, the fundamental problem is that he is not strong enough. As long as he can be promoted to pill condensation realm or a higher realm within 100 years, he will definitely be able to speak in the Southern Alliance. At least there is no problem in sheltering a planet. You. Zhang Hao was completely speechless to Zhou Ji. Seeing his firm appearance, he finally asked, "Are you sure?" "Well, I may even ask Brother Hao to help me with one last thing," Zhou Ji said, beckoning. A duffel bag flew out from the dark compartment behind the curtain. Zhang Hao opened the duffel bag and glanced inside quietly. He closed it abruptly. He glanced left and right to make sure that there was no one else, and then lowered his voice and approached Zhou Ji. "Are you crazy? There are so many spirit crystals. It's going to cost a lot of money to be discovered by someone with a heart." "Oops. As soon as you report it, you are right. These are what I have saved over the years. The source is very clear. There are 500 in total." This number made Zhang Hao's scalp go numb. When Zhou Ji made a move this week, it was his salary for half a year. "Hey! No! Brother! What are you asking me to do? You want to buy my life, right? I don't want to kill people and set fires. It's not that serious, I just want Brother Hao to help me find a way to see if I can transfer my license plate to Tianjia No. 1 city." Zhou Ji said with a smile, "After all, you have to seek a living there. Ziaji, aren't you giving me a problem? Do you know how expensive the land in Tianjia No. 1 city is now? That's all, over there, even a small shop of 50 square meters can't be rented for another year." Zhang Hao, the corners of his mouth were straight, obviously frightened by Zhou Ji's plan. In the small shop, Zhou Ji and Zhang Hao were whispering to each other. 50 square meters of shop is enough. I have saved some rent here. The key is that it's more difficult to change the relationship with this thing. You wait for me to ask you, and I don't know if the supervisors have any channels." Listening to Zhang Hao's words, Zhou Ji's brows furrowed. He thought for a while, and then stuffed a booklet into Zhang Hao's hand. "Go back and copy a copy yourself, don't tell others. If there is a relationship that can be connected, just use this." Using things like improving spells to reward some key personnel, Zhang Hao also helped Zhou Ji in this kind of thing, so he was quite familiar with it. Only this time, he saw Zhou Ji's sneaky appearance, and subconsciously glanced at the handwritten title on the title page of the booklet. Neiwan, Fa. Zhang Hao kept his mouth shut, but was directly covered by Zhou Ji. SHH. Zhou Ji hurriedly signaled to Zhang Hao not to be too surprised to make a sound, until Zhang Hao's face flushed from being held back, he didn't react, and let go of his hand embarrassedly. Zhang Hao was a little flustered, he glanced outside, closed the door of the shop and locked it, lowered his voice and said, "Did you do what happened last night?" Last night? Zhou froze behind him and forcibly controlled his expression. What happened last night? Don't pretend to be a brother to me. Last night, 3 outsiders died on the North Street side. It is said that they slipped over from Suanjia City No. 1 and made a mistake there. Zhang Hao said. The sound was so oppressive that I was afraid that the walls would have ears. Listen to the news from over there. These guys killed a down-and-out young man in the inner city and got a lot of good things. Hearing this, Zhou Ji's expression became solemn. He suddenly remembered that the 3 bags obtained last night had not been checked. Originally, he was going to wait for the limelight to pass for a while, but he didn't expect those 3 guys to be so rich. How come? What kind of strength do I have? They are 3 foundations. Oh, yes. You're just a chi practitioner. Zhang Hao relaxed a little at this time. Intermediate level exercises are generally only possessed by people in the inner city. The first time he saw this thing, he remembered the news he learned this morning. Don't worry, I created this thing myself, there's absolutely no problem with it. Zhou Ji patted Zhang Hao on the shoulder with a calm tone. This Neiwan method was indeed created by Zhou Ji himself, and it was the first version of the middle-level exercises he created. If we talk about the overall effect, it is also in the middle and lower reaches of the middle-level exercises. On a remote planet like Bai Shi Er Seeing, throwing out this middle-level cultivation method can also attract a lot of people's attention. In the field of cultivating exercises, of course the best one is the top quality Neiwan Fa with the 3 entries created by the exercise editor. This is also Zhou Ji's cultivating method. He himself has also improved 3 versions of Neiwan Gong based on this exercise method. The first version is considered to be the best in the beginner level, and is currently used for collection. The third version is currently being perfected and is ready to be taught to my daughter. The second edition is now given. Zhang Hao didn't see him either. Hearing Zhou Ji say that he was allowed to keep the bottom line, he flipped through the exercises on the spot and experimented according to the instructions above. The speed of the gathering of spirit energy around him made his face red again. This time, it was exciting. Brother, you are awesome. This technique is dozens of times better than the that I practiced before. With this thing, although I don't dare to give you a guarantee, there is at least a 70% chance of success. Zhang Hao cherished the exercises and put them back into his arms, and said solemnly to Zhou Ji. Then I will trouble Brother Hao. In fact, no matter if I succeed or fail, I have to go to the first big city. If I can't get it done, I don't have to return these things. It's just my reward for taking care of you all these years. Hey, don't say anything in return. In fact, at first, I just thought you were a good person to get along with. Later, when I saw that you adopted our daughter, I thought you were a good person. Helping you is just a little effort. Zhang Hao smiled. He patted Zhou Ji on the shoulder. At first, I was wondering how you guys have the confidence to go to the top of the city, but now, I think it's really possible for you to be able to get along there. Then wait for my news and I'll give it to you within 5 days. An answer. Zhang Hao said, picked up the duffel bag, turned around and walked out. When he came to the door, he stopped and pointed to the small cloth bag on the ground outside the receiving platform that he had brought in when he came in. Also, this is the sugar, milk powder, and fruit that we bought for our daughter. Don't take it for yourself, kid. Hearing Zhang Hao's words, Zhou Ji smiled helplessly, and was also moved. I call Zhang Hao Brother Hao. In recent years, he has really been like his elder brother, and he has helped with the official affairs of the outer city. In the past few years, when raising a daughter, Zhang Hao also sent milk powder every 3 weeks. If it weren't for Brother Hao's help, Zhou Ji and Zhou Xiaoyui's life would never be as moist as today. According to his words, this is our daughter. He also joked many times that if his daughter can't get married when she grows up, he will let his own hairy boy marry him as a daughter-in-law. Daddy, did Uncle Zhang come just now? Xiao Rui didn't know when she opened her eyes, her legs stretched out on the bed, and it looked like she was just sitting numb. Yes, he brought something delicious to Xiao Rui. Zhou Ji carefully pondered the exercises in front of him and changed it one by one. Xiao Rui tilted her head, as if she was seriously thinking about something, before she said, I just heard from my eldest dad, are we going to move? Zhou Ji's pen stopped for a while, and lightly rubbed his daughter's hair. Yes, we are going to move, we are going to a bigger city, where there are more delicious food, richer spiritual essence, and a better school will teach Xiao Rui to practice. But, when we're gone, Xiao Bai will miss us. Xiao Bai is a puppy from the clothing store next door, with a very mixed lineage. Zhou Ji remembered that when they just brought them back, they still pulled them out every day, but after 3 or 2 days of interest passed, they didn't care. The dog was locked out of the door every day, and not even the gate was allowed in. Occasionally, the owner remembers to feed him something. If he can't remember, the dog will go to the garbage heap and get dirty. The owner is also increasingly disliked seeing the dog, beating and scolding at every turn. Nominally owned, in fact, it is no different from a stray dog. Xiao Rui doesn't have many friends, so she often feeds Xiao Bai some leftovers from her own family. Occasionally, Zhou Ji cooks meat and meat bones to feed Xiao Bai. After coming and going, the puppy and Xiao Rui are familiar with each other. Sometimes they don't even listen to the owner's words, but just listen to Xiao Rui's words. It doesn't matter, we can talk to the neighbors and buy Xiao Bai. But if we buy Xiao Bai, Xiao Rui will take on the responsibility of disciplining and feeding Xiao Bai. Zhou Ji took her daughter into her arms, put her palms on the soles of her feet, and washed the meridians of her legs with spirit energy over and over again. After a while, she jumped down by herself. There was no one in the morning, so Zhou Ji moved a reclining chair and lay at the door, while revising the content of Ne Wanshu, while watching his daughter play at the door. A couple who opened a clothing store next door had an 8 or 9-year-old son at home, and they didn't know where they went. On the contrary, the little white dog was still huddled at the door, basking in the sun as lazy as Zhou Ji. There were not many people on the street, but Zhou Ji clearly noticed that the patrols of the guards had increased. In half the morning, 3 teams of medium-sized floating shuttles had already passed by. These medium-sized air shuttles are printed with the city guard's logo. Xiao Rui followed the mixed-haired dog named Xiao Bai running back and forth on the street, until she was so tired that she gasped slightly, then she ran to the small bench beside Zhou Ji's reclining chair, sat down obediently, and listened to her. The movement in and out of the street, listening to the rustling sound of Zhou Ji's pen falling on the book. And Xiao Bai is also obediently lying at Xiao Rui's feet, looking around with his tongue out. Looking at the appearance of her daughter and this puppy, Zhou Ji smiled, cleaned up, and walked into the clothing store on the side. Xiao Zhou, why do you come to visit me when you have time? Are you going to buy clothes for your daughter? It was a middle-aged woman who was very short and shrewd in her eyes. Good morning, Sister Wang. Zhou Ji smiled warmly. We're going to move out in a few days. I think Xiao Rui has a good relationship with your little white, so I'll ask you to see if we can sell it to us. Sister Wang glanced at the dirty Xiao Bai, the disgust in her eyes quickly disappeared, and she turned to smile and said, Oh, Xiao Zhou, what you said, our Xiao Bai accompanied Xiao Yang for a while. Nian, the relationship between the two of them is very good, if Xiao Yang knows that we have sold his dog, he will lose his temper when he comes back. 5-point spirit crystal, if it doesn't work, you can keep it for yourself. Zhou Ji pouted. Are you still in a good relationship? Sometimes they are beaten and scolded, but now Xiao Bai is afraid to run away with his tail between his tail when he sees your Xiao Yang. When we bought it. Hearing that Sister Wang still wanted to bargain, Zhou Ji turned around and left without further talking. In the outer city, this kind of pet dog, even the best pedigree, can only sell a piece of spirit crystal. Ah, Xiaozhou, the price is easy to negotiate. Seeing that Zhou Ji turned around and was about to leave, Sister Wang hurriedly changed her tune. You see, I'm used to haggling often. I think Xiaobai and your daughter are good, so it's cheaper, just charge you 5 points of spirit crystals. Hearing this, Zhou Ji stopped. Sister Wang, you should have said that earlier, mainly because I think my daughter likes it. Do you think I will directly pass it to you with a jade card? As he spoke, Zhou Ji had already used his mind to issue a transfer payment instruction in the jade card, and the reason for payment was by a dog. On the other hand, Sister Wang wanted to say more. Seeing that Zhou Ji was neat and tidy, she had to take out the jade card, and her thoughts were touched. The jade card automatically turned on the scanning function and scanned Xiaobai's whole body. With the jade cards on both sides touching each other, Zhou Ji could use his will to see that his account balance in the jade cards was 0.5 less, leaving only 2,897.3. In the past 3 years, he still saved some money. Of course, this amount of money was 2 or 3 times worse than the purchase of foundation building qualifications. Did Daddy buy Xiaobai? In fact, Xia Rui noticed when Zhou Ji walked to the clothing store. She waited at the door of the store with a small white eye. When I heard Zhou Ji come out, I hoped to speak. Well, it's done, Xiaobai will be our family from now on. Zhou Ji nodded and smiled. But we have to take Xiaobai back first and give Xiaobai a bath first. He actually wanted to do this a long time ago. Xiaobai barked. In fact, the little white dog had turned into a little brown dog within a year. It was dirty all over, black and white unknown. Clumps on the hair. That is, his daughter can't see it. Seeing that every time their play is over, Zhou Ji has to carefully wash her hands for her daughter. Okay. Big Daddy is awesome. Xia Rui happily picked up the little white dog with a covered face at her feet. This poor little guy still didn't know what happened. Zhou Ji looked at her daughter's movements with a speechless expression. Well, now, let's wash the 2 little guys together. At noon, Zhou Ji specially cooked a beef brisket to celebrate the addition of a new family member. The daughter even ate a small bowl of rice happily. And Xiaobai, who has been cleaned and turned into Xiaobai, finally enjoys the benefits of not having to turn over the garbage and being able to go to bed. Thanks to the help of a magical spell like Huangziu, Zhou Ji wouldn't agree with her daughter crying today. After settling down the niece who was taking a nap, Zhou Ji finally found the time, put up a sign on the door of the store, and then closed the door, and took out 3 fist-sized bags from the dark compartment. The storage bag, according to the logo, is produced by Wanfang firm. Looking at the sign above, you can guess that the space inside should have a size of 1 cubic meter. As far as Zhou Ji knows, this Wanfang firm seems to be doing a lot of business, boasting several star clusters. But the shop with their name can only be found in the city. The magic shop outside the city is said to be theirs, but there is no basis. The review of the magic tricks sold in the magic trick store is much stricter than that of the commonly used spells. There is currently only one in the outer city, which is located next to the employment office. Only those who have obtained the qualifications of mercenaries are qualified to purchase the cultivation magic tricks. The mercenary is also a special profession, and the main reason for its emergence is that the planetary administrator does not have enough control over the planet. The main reason is that in addition to the large gathering points of spiritual essences on the planet, there are many scattered small points. The large ones are a few hundred square meters, and the small ones are a few square meters in size. This kind of place is completely useless for planet management. If you deal with it, you will not be able to make ends meet. If you don't care, there will be wild beasts or those thieves entrenched in the mountains. These existences put little pressure on the security in the city, but they pose a great threat to the traffic between cities. This is also a necessity for the existence of the profession of mercenaries. They will form groups to complete some protection tasks or clear things to make a living. A storage bag of 1 cubic meter is the smallest storage bag, but as far as Joji knows, a storage bag of this size is enough to take away half of his own property. Ordinary people don't use this stuff at all. There is no complicated operation method for this thing. The first step is to open the bag, the second step is to put your hand in, and the third step is to dig it out. Overall, it is like the dimensional pocket of a blue civet cat with round hands, no ears, and a big face. If you need to find something in an emergency, you can only touch it one by one. In this storage bag, in addition to some spiritual crystals, which are books, there are also some things in small bottles. Joji didn't understand this, so he had to take them out one by one. It's just that the more you dig, the more you spend. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com, the more frightened he became. The 3 storage bags are basically full. Except for the last one, which also contains some sundries, the rest are all spirit crystals, exercises, and small bottles of medicinal pills. He took out all of them and counted them. There were more than 2,000 pieces of spirit crystals alone, which doubled Joji's assets in an instant. Joji's eyes were dazzled by the little bit of aura overflowing from the light. Not daring to put more, Joji hurriedly used the 2 empty storage bags to stuff all the spirit crystals in, so that he had time to see what was left on the table. First of all, there are the vials that fill the entire table, almost all of them are made of jade. Some have labels on them, such as Huiwanzan and Naiwandan, while others have no labels at all. Joji didn't dare to move about such unknown things, so he had to put them in a corner and slowly consider how to use them in the future. As for the rest of the exercises, there are more than 90 practice exercises, more than 30 recipes, and more than 70 commonly used exercises. Although they are all low-level exercises, they still satisfy Joji. All of these are, if he hasn't read it, he can study it later. In the rest of the junk, except for the 5 projectiles that were used to attack the man last night, everything else was of little value. This projectile is actually pure metal casting, and there is nothing magical about it. There is also a booklet in the sundries, which reads the method of gathering elements. Joji had never encountered this thing before, and he didn't know what it was. Looking at the time, Joji put the rest of the exercises into the storage bag, then grabbed the purpose array and slowly closed his eyes. No matter what it is, just by looking at the name, you know that it should be a formation that gathers spiritual energy. Joji had never dealt with this thing before, so it should be controlled. I just hope this thing can be recognized by my own exercise editor. The array of elements: extract the spirit crystal spirit element, pull the underground spirit element, and increase the concentration of the spirit element in the formation to 300% of the surrounding area. The illustrated guide to the array: white. The concentration of spirit elements in the array increases by an additional 10%, and the consumption of spirit crystals increases by 100%. The moment he saw this exercise appear in the exercise editor, Joji knew that the wave was stable. This should be an atlas of the formation method, which is specially designed to increase the concentration of spiritual essence. Since the first entry is a double effect, it is estimated that it is the same as the secret method. The materials for arranging the array are only spirit crystals, and the size of the array can even be enlarged or reduced at will. Of course, the problem with this formation is that it will speed up the consumption of spirit crystals. Simply putting aside the extra effects, it is mentioned in the basic picture book overview that 2 of the 3 times the concentration are from the underground spirit energy, and 1 is provided by the spirit crystal. If the extra effects are counted, this ratio is just turned upside down. Without thinking too much, Joji immediately used the few remaining Taoist points to change the entry and completed the purification. Green. The concentration of spirit elements in the formation is increased by an additional 200%, and the consumption of spirit crystals is reduced by 20%. You're done. Joji opened his eyes, and there was a little excitement in his eyes. To gather Yuan array, you need to outline the array through spirit Yuan, leaving 12 inlaid holes as the base point of spirit crystal to provide consumption. In the morning, I was still thinking about where there would be a place rich in spiritual energy, whether I had to go to the largest city. This time, 5 times the concentration of spiritual essence should be enough, right? And the most subtle thing is that most of the spiritual energy provided by this formation is drawn from the ground, so that you don't have to worry about absorbing too much and attracting the attention of the surrounding. Joji spent the whole afternoon in a slightly excited mood. Now he is waiting for the dark night to come, and tonight he will start building the foundation based on this yuan gathering formation. The waiting time seemed to pass very slowly. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Joji closed the storybook, looked at her daughter who was breathing evenly in her arms, and tiptoed out of bed. On the other side of the makeshift kennel, Xiao Bai was awakened by Joji's actions. After looking up at Joji, he closed his eyes and snored. Joji stroked the ground with one hand, and Ling Yuan walked under the floor tiles to outline it. He was going to cover the living area behind the curtain with the yuan gathering formation. The entire formation is not complicated, but there are many places that need to be outlined with spiritual energy. Nearly 2/3 of Joji's spiritual energy has been consumed by the end. After breaking through the 12 base points and embedding the spirit crystal, the formation will naturally operate. After a few breaths, Joji only felt that the surrounding air was much fresher, and the concentration of spiritual essence in this living area began to rise rapidly, and the breath was full of carefree feeling. On the bed, Xiaorui turned over, looking up like a big character, and slept soundly. Xiaobai in the kennel was also turning his stomach up at this time, his head tilted to one side unconsciously. At the moment, Joji didn't wait any longer, he sat cross-legged on the ground and recovered his spiritual energy. The middle-level wind and thunder cleansing yuan law was fully exerted, and the concentration of the spiritual essence that had just risen in the air dropped rapidly. But soon, the 12 spirit crystals around them flashed slightly, and a formation outlined by spirit essence faintly appeared on the ground. The concentration of spirit essence in the air actually rose again. At the same time, in the backyard training room of the Foundation Building Application Office in the outer city, several formations flickered indistinctly before returning to normal. Not only this place, but also several other places where the underground spiritual energy was touched were all affected at this moment, but they recovered quickly. Fortunately, it was night, and no one found this. But even if it is discovered, it will be fine. The underground spiritual energy is intricate and complicated. At least on this remote planet, no one can trace the source of these changes through the underground spiritual energy. In the small shop, Joji's wind and thunder cleansing method has been in full operation for a week, and the surrounding spirit is still full of energy. This was the first time in his history that he could practice so recklessly. All around, you can faintly see the wind element converging on the surface of the body, invading his skin, and wandering around on his limbs, accompanied by small thunder snakes, scurrying under Joji's skin. Wind and thunder. The absorption speed of spirit essence is increased by 200%, and the physical quality is improved by practicing the exercises. Blue, absorption speed of spirit energy is increased by an additional 200%, blue, cultivating the exercises, the physical fitness has been improved to a certain extent, blue, cultivation method. The affinity of wind and thunder elements increases. The so-called element affinity is also an abstract concept. There is no such thing as spiritual roots in this world. All things and all beings can be cultivated, and it is this element affinity that causes them to cultivate in different directions. High element affinity will increase the power, release speed, and other aspects of the corresponding spells, while low ones will be the opposite. 5 times the speed of absorption of spiritual essence and 5 times the concentration of spiritual essence finally reached a balance, and Joji's state slowly reached its peak during this process. With a slight thought, the operation of Ling Yuan was changed to the operation method of Foundation Establishment Secret Treasure. A burst of cleansing power suddenly erupted around Joji. The pores all over his body seemed to be opened at this moment, and Ling Yuan swam frantically over him. The muscle meridians of his body converged in his dantian, and the numb-tearing sensation made Joji in the cold air. This is not the end. The Danshan, which was already full of spirit energy, felt a rising pain faintly. This is also the first time he has established a foundation. This feeling of pain made him almost think that his Danshan is about to be broken. Fortunately, what he expected did not happen. Danshan's resilience was much stronger than he imagined. Under the operation of the Foundation Establishment Secret Treasure, the concentration of the gaseous spirit essence gradually deepened. I don't know how long it took, but Joji seemed to hear a dip in his ear. In the Danshan, a drop of crystal clear spiritual essence fell. The drop of this drop of spirit essence liquid was like the trigger of the starting gun, and drop after drop of spirit essence liquid fell, and it rained spirit essence in Joji's Danshan. Suddenly, the sound of wind and thunder sounded, and in the pain of a slight tear, Joji saw that his Danshan began to expand. Ling Yuan turned into rain, perhaps because of Joji's strong spirit. This process lasted for a long time, and at the same time, it was accompanied by the expansion of Danshan, pain and happiness. When the volume of the Danshan was fully expanded to 3 times in the state of inner vision, the last few drops of spirit essence liquid condensed in the Danshan fell. The pores all over the body are closed, but the numbness of the body remains. Golem. Time seems to have passed by for a long time. The spirit essence in Joji's Danshan has turned into a shallow pool of spirit essence liquid, and a small bubble appeared in this pool of spirit essence liquid. A series of bubbles popped out. The bubbles gradually disappeared and turned into a spring, which seemed to turn this pool of spirit essence into living water. This is the spring of Danshan, and the foundation was successfully established. With Wang Quan's eyes, Joji's cultivation has a foundation. Even if his spiritual energy is exhausted, he can recover on his own without deliberately practicing. And Joji can also clearly feel that the purity of his spiritual essence has increased not only by 5 times as stated in the Foundation Establishment Secret Collection, but at least by more than 10 times, which should also include the strengthening of the Foundation Establishment body. Joji tried to run the cultivation technique again to absorb spiritual energy. This time, the pores opened to absorb the spiritual energy, and the spring water in the Danshan seemed to boil, and the spiritual energy in the spring's eyes kept churning into a liquid, which merged into the Danshan. As the morning light faded, Joji opened his eyes in a loss. It is said in the secret treasure of Foundation Establishment that from the 1st level to the 9th level of the Foundation building stage, springs are opened in the Danshan. The spring has 9 eyes, which is the 9th level, and the fullness of the Danshan is the peak. Last night's practice had caused his Danshan's spiritual energy to rise slightly, and his spring eyes also grew slightly. However, I looked at the spirit crystals that had been cracked around and turned grey. This consumption is still a bit huge, which makes him feel a little bit of a pain when he is used to being frugal.